Hello, everybody. This is Donna Anderson, author of Lovefraud.com. And today I have with us Travis Vining. Now, Travis is the author of a book called Transforming Darkness into Light, Forgiving: Spiritual Lessons from My Life with a Serial Killer. Travis's father was convicted of killing 4 people and spent 24 years on death row. And he's going to be presenting a program for Lovefraud Continuing Education called The Miracle in the Madness: Pathway to Healing from Destructive Relationships. So welcome, Travis. I'm so glad to be with you.
Thank you, Donna. I'm very grateful to be here today.
Okay, so as an adult, you realized that your father was a psychopath and a convicted serial killer. So what effect did he have on you while you were growing up?
Well, obviously it was very dramatic. Looking back, and it's funny, I don't think about it that often anymore, but now looking back, I idolized my dad like any other kid. I really wanted to be like my father. I knew there was some differences in his personality that made that very difficult. And that was very, very difficult to deal with as a young man. My dad, when I was growing up, was a con man. What he really did was he sold property that belonged to other people and made millions of dollars doing it. We lived in a $1 million home on Biscayne Bay. On the outside, which is so common in situations like this, everything looked just so nice and pretty, but on the inside, it was not like that at all. It wasn't until a little bit later in life, my father was convicted of white-collar crime. He spent 3.5 years in prison for those crimes. And during that time, he planned and set up the opportunity to murder 4 people over a period of 17 months. It was really motivated by money, but he murdered these 4 people in 3 different incidents, which really qualifies him as a serial killer. He was caught in the act of attempting to kill 2 more people, and that's what sent him to Florida's death row. For me, I was in my mid-20s at that time, and I think that's where I started to understand that there was something very different about my father. Obviously, as a young man, I started to explore what that was, but I really didn't understand it. And I will tell you, after the discovery of that, more than anything else, I think it was shock, it was anger, it was resentment. I think more than anything else, I really struggled with the why me aspect of it. I couldn't understand that. And I went on, for many years, I really didn't deal with it for the most part because it was very hard for me to wrap my mind around that. It's very helpful to put a label on it and to understand the characteristics of a sociopath. That's helpful intellectually, but to understand that that's what your father is or someone you love has those characteristics is a very difficult thing, I think, for most of us. And certainly the people that you deal with on a daily basis, coming to terms with that is really one of the most difficult things. And I suffered a great deal as a result of that. I had no idea how much harm it was causing me really by not dealing with it and not looking at it carefully and understanding the effects that it had on me. For me, I had paralyzing migraine headaches, I had chronic back pain, I had sleep apnea. I used to wake up gasping for air and nightmares. I used to have random nosebleeds, and there was just so many things. But now, it's kind of hard to describe, certainly in just a couple of minutes. But one of the things I get to do now, even with the course, is to lay out the process that really changed all of that for me. I'm very grateful today to be able to say that I don't have any of those issues anymore, but it wasn't until I became willing to do something about it. And now in my life, it's really what I consider a priceless gift. So initially, it was something hurtful and damaging in my life, but I was given an opportunity to do something different with it. And now for me, I'm grateful for it. I often say that I found my freedom not in spite of these things, but because of them. But first, I had to become willing. And for some of us, it takes quite a bit of pain before we're willing to do that.
Okay. So how were you able to break free of the pain that this incident or this experience caused you?
Well, it's easier said than done. And it's not necessarily an easy process, I should say, but it's much easier than not dealing with it. And for me, as I mentioned before, I suffered a great deal. It wasn't really until I was brought to my knees as a result of this stuff. It wasn't until I recognized that I was suffering as a result of not dealing with it that I became willing to do something about it. And I think for the first time in my life, I was willing to ask for help. And I think it was the help that I was given. And it was really from other people like me, like you, like those people that might take this course or those people that converse in the community on your website, it was people that had healed from these types of relationships that were able to show me the way. I trusted the process because it was coming from people who'd been there, who'd experienced it. They described it to me. Most importantly, they described that experience of shock and not understanding, and really more than anything, the resistance to accepting the idea that you're in a relationship that not only was hurtful and damaging, but is irreparable, that there's really no hope for the relationship itself. So I had to look elsewhere. And as I said before, it's really that process that I teach now that has changed this experience from one of misery into something that I genuinely consider a priceless gift in my life that I'm very grateful for.
Okay, so in your presentation, you talk about forgiveness. And sometimes people have a hard time with the idea of forgiveness because they feel like they've been betrayed in a way that is simply unforgivable. So how do you define forgiveness?
Well, the first part is, like you mentioned, and the most difficult part is dealing with the actual perception of what forgiveness is or what forgiveness is not. I was like many others. I somehow thought forgiveness was related to condoning someone's behavior or somehow letting them off the hook, that there was a relationship there, or continuing to submit to that or encouraging that type of behavior. Forgiveness has nothing to do with those things. That is not what forgiveness is about. Forgiveness is really not so much about them. It's about ourselves. And first, it's recognizing what unforgiveness does, the harm it causes, how it affects us in our daily lives. It also affects the relationships that we have today, because we see other relationships in the world through this filter that's been poisoned by this relationship of a sociopath. And it comes up in trust issues and all sorts of things. So I think that's probably the most important part of it, is understanding that forgiveness is really releasing ourselves from a prison of misery. It doesn't condone the behavior. I think the easiest way to explain it for me is it's really more related to acceptance, which is really easier said than done.
Yeah.
Those of us that have been in those relationships, the acceptance of where we are in it, of what it is, and being okay with recognizing that you can no longer engage or interact in a certain way with a sociopath or salvage a relationship is very difficult. But I like to describe it this way. It really is, it's giving up the wish that the past could be different. Intellectually, it makes sense, but it's easier said than done, as I like to say. The process outlined in the course that I teach helps us come to terms with that. It brings about a willingness and an open-mindedness that allows that to happen. And I would also like to say that paradoxically, if I do not forgive and I continue to have anger and resentment and even hatred towards another, I am much more likely to continue to fall victim to that type of behavior, as opposed to when I go through the process of letting go, I forgive and let go, then I'm no longer attracted to that in any way, shape, or form, and I find my freedom. And lastly, I'll just put it this way. To me, this is the way I understand it. And I've had great experience with therapists and everything else in my life and in recovery. But the process of letting go, I've come to understand all real therapy is release from the past. And what it brings about is a newfound freedom in our lives and peace of mind, which is something that I've been seeking my whole life. I didn't know that it could be found in the midst of this experience. And that's why I often refer to it as the miracle and the madness, because as maddening as it seems when we're in the midst of it, we often don't realize that it is that experience in and of itself that does offer us our freedom. We just have to be willing to look at it differently, maybe have a little bit of an open mind. And that's what the course teaches. As I said, it's easier said than done, but there is a process that brings that about.
It sounds fabulous, and I know the material that you have is just going to be so helpful for so many people, so I'm really pleased to be able to make this opportunity available to Lovefraud readers and to anybody who wants to take the course. So thank you, Travis. We're looking forward to it, and we'll see you soon on the course.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you so much for what you do. Very grateful.
Thank you. All righty. Talk to you later then, Travis.
Bye-bye.